It's a new year, and with the new year comes that craving for a fresh start. If you're an office worker, if you type for a living, or game at your desk after work or school, this might also be a good time to freshen up your desk with a new mechanical keyboard, new desktop audio gear, or some other desk accessories that can make the time you spend sitting in front of your computer a bit more productive, more comfortable, and a bit more pleasant. So in today's video, part 1 of this 3-part series, we're taking a look at some quality mechanical keyboards. And the focus here was to pick a few good options in the value and performance segments, with prices ranging from $70 to $160 that can offer you great performance, quality, and aesthetics without breaking the bank. This video is sponsored by PCBWay, the one-stop shop solution for bringing your hobbyist or professional consumer electronics product designs to life. Hello and welcome to IOSAM. I'm Sam Franco, and this is a channel where I do tech reviews and show you how to build, fix, and mod all sorts of computer gear. In today's video, part 1 of this home office upgrades for the New Year's series, we are checking out 6 mechanical keyboards in many different sizes, styles, and prices to give you a few options in case you need a new workhorse keyboard for the new year, and one that can also double duty as a good gaming board. These keyboards were picked based on the best value for money of all the review samples I have received in 2022, which means we'll be focusing on the value and performance segments of my IOSAM's Keyboards Market Segments chart. Later on part 2, we'll also go through some competitively priced premium desktop audio solutions to improve both your work and your gaming. And then on part 3, we'll go through a few useful home office accessories to help you light up, clean, organize, and improve the comfort of your desk space. As a disclaimer, all the keyboards shown here were sent to me by their respective vendors, but regardless of how my review samples were acquired, that doesn't change absolutely anything in my views and opinions about any of the products I'm showing here. As usual, there will be links for everything in the description below, and most of those will be affiliate links that can generate revenue to help support this channel without any additional cost to you if you decide to use them. And while your choice to use these links is obviously appreciated, that also doesn't affect the content of this video in any way. So let's start with the first pick in the 65% category, Epomaker's TH66 for $90. The TH66 is a polycarbonate encased small form factor keyboard that checks all the boxes you could expect for its competitive price point. The layout is a very compact exploded 65% in either ANSI or ISO, which in this case means having all the keys of a traditional 60%, plus the arrows keys, a volume knob, and 2 extra keys on the right side that you can use as page up and down in its stock configuration, or remap them to whatever else you want through their Epomaker driver software. Like every other keyboard in this roster, the TH66 has N-key rollover and can be used both wired through USB-C or wireless with its included 2.4 GHz dongle and 2200 mAh battery. But unlike every other keyboard in this video, the TH66 does not offer Bluetooth. You have a pretty decent choice of switches from both Gateron's Pro line and Epomaker's self-branded linear and tactile pre-lubed switches. Also, like the rest of the keyboards in this list, the TH66 is 5-pin hot swappable, so you can always replace the switches with any other Cherry MX compatible options later on. The version I have here came with Gateron Pro brown light tactiles. Considering how awesome Gateron Pro switches feel right out of the box, there is basically no need to lube these switches yourself. The TH66 PCB offers per-key RGB illumination in the south-facing orientation, which allows you to pick from a few pre-configured hardwired colors and animation options, as well as set brightness and animation speed, or you can configure them further using Epomaker's standard driver software. And like many other keyboards in this list, here you also get the always useful addition of a volume knob that is red anodized aluminum on my sample. The stock keycaps are thick die sub PBT in Epomaker's own MDA profile, which has a large spherical surface and that is slightly taller than the Cherry profile. The thick PBT walls give these caps a great sound, and the extra large surface and center legends make it super easy to see its characters and to type without too many typos. These caps also work well for gaming, since they're about the same height of the OEM profile that most gaming keyboards come with. My copy came with the Theory yellow and off-white color theme, which looks really nice in my opinion. But because the switch sockets are south-facing, you can replace these caps with any other 65% compatible keycap set you like, including Cherry profile, and they should work here with no problems. The TH66 has gaskets isolating its steel plate from the plastic case, but these gaskets here serve only to prevent vibrations from traveling from the plate and PCB assembly to the rest of the case. In other words, They work well to make this keyboard sound clean, but they don't work to give it any significant amount of plate flex. But as I always like to remind folks, if you don't smash your keys with jackhammer fingers, you don't necessarily need much plate flex in a keyboard to begin with. Although, if you do like plate flex, stick around for some of the other picks coming later in the video. The stabs here are plate mounted, which is to be expected for this price range. And this is the only thing in this keyboard that will require modding before this keyboard is ready for duty, since the plate cutouts are not very tight and can cause the stabs housings to wiggle. But considering how easy it is to mod plate-mounted stabilizers, there's no reason not to do it here. To mod them, start by removing the switches of the large stabilized keys. Use some pointy tools to unlock the stabs housings clips, and then lift and slide them out. Then lube the housings and stabs with a middle-grade thickness lubricant, such as the ever-popular Krytox 205 Grade 0. Here I'm using my own Krytox mix of 50/50 205 Grade 2 grease with 105 oil. Use a brush to apply a good visible layer of lube in both the inner walls of the housings and all sides of the stabs. For the wires, you can either use Krytox on the bands and then the cheap Permatex dielectric grease for the tips, or the thicker and more expensive Krytox XHT BDZ in all areas as I usually do these days. The main advantage of the BDZ is the fact that its application will likely last longer than Permatex, but the typing feel is almost indistinguishable between them when correctly applied. Then, cut some small pieces of medical fabric tape and apply them to the plate cutouts on the opposite side where the wire enters the housing. This will eliminate any wiggle room between the plate cutouts and the stabs housings. And if you like your stabs extra quiet like I do, you can also apply some silicone stickers underneath the area where the stabs hit the PCB on the bottom out. This removes the crispiness of the stabs bottom out, which I don't particularly care for, but they silence the stab sound on the downstroke, which I appreciate. The case here is a 2-parts thick polycarb shell that looks and feels nice, but because they rely on clips to attach together, you get some creaking when handling the board, but not when it's sitting on your desk. The case measures 32.5 centimeters in width, 11.4 centimeters in depth, 2.13 centimeters in height in the front side, and 2.75 centimeters in the back side in the flat position. You also get rubberized flippy feet for height adjustments in 3 positions, 3, 6, and 10 degrees. It weighs 800 grams or 1 pound and 12 ounces, which is quite hefty for its small size. You can get the TH66 in opaque white or with a smoky translucent dark gray tint that I have here, that lets some of the RGB light to show through. The board also comes with plenty of sound damping, both in the bottom case and between the plate and the PCB, which means this board doesn't sound hollow and plasticky at all, as you hear in the typing test. Epomaker's driver software is, like with all other boards in this video, pretty basic, but it gets the job done. You get keys remapping, macros recording, and backlighting configurations. One thing you don't get with the TH66 though is multi-layer programming, which is something I miss here. That means you have to use the second layer with the function and navigation keys that are hardwired in the keyboard's controller and which cannot be changed. Luckily though, Epomaker's boards always come with very good English manuals that are easy to read and understand, which is always a plus. Epomaker offers a limited 1-year warranty on all its keyboards. Alright, so let's hear the TH66 in both its stock configuration and with its modded stabilizers for you to see how much you can improve its sound if you decide to mod its stabs. Like with all the boards I'm showing in this video, I like the sound of this keyboard a lot, especially when considering the price point here. It is not a deep, thocky sound, since the thick case sound damper absorbs most of the low frequencies. but the sound of the Gateron Pros is still very pleasant here, with well-defined bottom outs. While the stock stabs are not the worst you can get on a production keyboard, the modding definitely cleaned it up and made the overall sound of the TH66 much more pleasant. Who is this board recommended to? I'd say that if you're in the market for a small form factor mechanical keyboard for both typing and gaming on a small or cramped desk, but one that doesn't forego the arrows keys, and you're on a tight budget, the TH66 is hard to beat. It is a very good overall package that offers quality and features that makes this board punch far above its price tier. Here you get a durable board with great switches, a very good typing experience, decent sound, and all the basics well covered. If you're a hobbyist designing your own keyboard, or an industry veteran looking to bring your next consumer electronics product to life, do yourself a favor and check out PCBWay's services in PCBs prototyping, manufacturing, and assembly, as well as in CNC machining, injection molding, and 3D printing. Regardless if you're looking into building a single prototype, completing a small batch production run, or searching for a high-volume OEM production partner, PCBWay is the leading one-stop shop solution that offers everything you need. Fast turnaround times, all the latest tech in PCB fabrication, access to the highest quality materials and parts from the most trusted suppliers in the industry, an easy-to-use interface to submit your designs, and a team of experts to help you during the whole process. Check the video description below for more information and for $5 off your first order with PCBWay.com. And huge thanks to PCBWay for sponsoring this channel. Now, moving on to the second 65% pick, which is something truly unique. The Feker Alice for $140. For those who don't know, Alice is the name given to keyboards that have a baked-in split layout, derived from the original design by Yuktsi from TGR Keyboards fame. Although the Feker Alice has a slightly different design from the original TGR Alice, which is a modified 60% layout instead of the Feker's modified 65% in the ANSI standard with a volume knob. Also known as Arisu, which includes the arrows keys and an extra column of 3 navigation keys on the right side instead of the left side on the original Alice. The Feker board also has a tent design, meaning it has an inclination forming a slight peak between the split, which is supposed to improve its ergonomics even further, allowing your wrists to be in a more natural position than with the original's Alice flat design. Although it has a pretty tall front side that might require a wrist rest depending on how you type. Feker makes wood wrist rests that are cut out specifically to fit the Feker Alice, which I'll leave a link in the description below. Now, your ability to type on an ergo keyboard like this will rely heavily on your typing technique. If you type with all 10 fingers with correct form, you get the gist of it pretty quickly. And once you do, you might actually like it so much that you might not even want to go back to a regular linear QWERTY layout. However, if you don't type with all 10 fingers and don't have a good typing technique, then a split layout like this will be borderline impossible to use. So here you can either take this as an incentive to learn how to type properly, or just stay clear of an Alice-style keyboard altogether. You get 3 ways to connect the keyboard to your computer, tablet, or phone. Wired through USB-C, and wireless with either its included 2.4 GHz dongle or Bluetooth 5.0. With its enormous 8000 mAh battery, you're guaranteed to use this keyboard in wireless mode for days on 2.4 GHz or even weeks if you stick to Bluetooth. The Feker Alice is 5 pins hot swappable with south-facing sockets, which means you can get it either as a bare bones kit or fully assembled with Gateron Pro yellow linear pre-lubed switches and Dysud PBT keycaps as the unit I have here. You also get the typical per-key RGB illumination schemes that you can pick from a few pre-configured hardwire colors and animations, plus brightness and speed, as well as from its driver software that gives you a bit more control over the lights. The controller offers AND key rollover and up to 1 kHz polling rate. Oh, and here you also get a volume knob that is not something most Alice-style boards usually come with, so that's a cool addition. The stock keycaps in the fully built version are very thick PBT in the cherry profile, and the dye-sublimated legends are surprisingly sharp and bold. These are really nice keycaps. You have the option to go with the black keyboard with black-themed keycaps or the white board with the white-themed ones, but both have very bright and contrasty orange legends. It has a gasket-mounted polycarbonate plate, but unlike with the TH66, here you do get plenty of plate bounce and flex, which gets emphasized by the smaller split PCB and plate design. And the nicest thing about this board is the fact that it requires no modding whatsoever. Its plate-mounted stabs are rock solid with no perceivable wiggle, rattle, or ticks. The Feker Alice has a plastic case that feels like ABS, but the manufacturer doesn't state what is the plastic mix used here. But it does feel quite premium and durable for its price. The case is 2 halves, also attached with clips and screws, but while there is a bit of flex, as you'd expect for a plastic keyboard, here you get no creaking at all, which is really nice. It also has the super convenient magnetic storage slot for you to keep its 2.4 GHz dongle, which is such a simple feature that I wish every wireless keyboard had. The case measures 36.7 centimeters in width, 13 centimeters in depth, 2.3 centimeters in height on the front side, and 3 centimeters in the back side in the flat position. You also get rubberized flippy feet for height adjustments for 3, 6, and 10 degrees. It weighs a hefty 1.92 kilograms or 2 pounds and 6.4 ounces. The board comes stuffed with plenty of silicone and foam sound damping, both in the bottom case and between the plate and the PCB, which results in a muted sound profile where all you hear is the sound from the switches with zero resonance from the case, which makes this keyboard a good choice to be used in a shared space where a noisy keyboard is not an option. The software here is the usual poorly designed bog standard stuff we're used to in most production keyboards these days. But it does work, and it allows you to save your configurations to the keyboard's memory, so you don't have to keep it running all the time in the background, which is nice. You get keys remapping, macro recording, and backlighting configurations. The keys remapping thing came really handy for me here, as I had to reprogram the Windows key to also work as a spacebar, since I always hit the space with my left thumb, which happens to fall right on top of that key in this layout configuration. That is an issue I have with all Alice-style boards I've ever tried, so it's not something particular to this Feker model. Here, you also don't get multi-layer programmability, which sucks. But the stock second layer configuration is well laid out and properly documented on its decent manual, which is good. One more important note about the software is that just like the Wowstick K98 I reviewed here in the channel some time ago, which uses the same software than the Feker, Windows Defender tags one component of the driver software as malware. But that is just Windows being overzealous, since other more reliable anti-malware software don't see any danger here. The problem seems to be the lack of a digital signature in one of the executables included in the package. One other area of potential concern with Feker keyboards, though, is the rather unclear situation regarding its warranty. My particular sample was sent by a vendor called CIDOO, which places the unpronounceable brand KX in front of the keyboard's name and the product title on Amazon. But you can get Feker products from a multitude of other vendors on Amazon, Banggood, and AliExpress. So here you'd rely on whatever warranty the specific vendor you get this keyboard from offers you, which might vary wildly depending on who that vendor is. So that is definitely something to consider when ordering one of these. As far as CIDOO goes, the specific vendor who provided me this sample, they told me they do honor a 1-year warranty for the Feker Alice when you buy it from them through Amazon, and that the only way to access it is through the customer support portal maintained by Amazon. So that means that within the first 30 days, you could simply return the product to Amazon with no questions asked, and after 30 days, you'd have to use Amazon messaging system to reach out to the vendor and arrange an RMA directly with them depending on the situation. Okay, let's hear how the Feker Alice sounds. As I mentioned before, the huge amount of sound damping materials used here make this a rather quiet keyboard, despite not using silent damped switches, which might be a good or a bad thing depending on your use case. You don't get any lower frequency sounds, which means you only hear the higher pitched faint clacks from the linear switches. Incidentally, by replacing the stock switches here for some silent ones, such as any of the famous CIDOO ABM084 or Boba gums for example, you'd have a dead silent keyboard with no need to mod the case in any way. Also worth mentioning here are the high quality stabs. Because of how solid and well lubed they come out of the box, you thankfully get no rattling, which is great. So, who do I think this keyboard is good for? If you have good 10 fingers typing technique, which would allow you to properly type on this thing, and you're interested in trying an ergonomic layout, the Feker Alice would be a great place to start. Alice keyboards can be fairly expensive in the custom keyboards world, so I think the full package here, which includes 2 options of wireless connections, is pretty compelling for its very reasonable $140 for the fully built keyboard. And because it is a fairly quiet keyboard, it would also be a good choice for open offices and shared rooms where low noise is a must. Let's move on to a more traditional layout now, a good old TKL form factor from the Epomaker CIDOO ABM084 for $95. As far as layout goes, 10 keyless or TKL needs no introduction, right? It has been a classic since the days of the original IBM Model M SSK, the keyboard that pioneered this layout, which is basically a full-size 104 keys with a numpad chopped off. And the advantages of a TKL for anyone who doesn't want a giant full-size keyboard in their desks is pretty clear, since here you don't have to learn how to navigate a new and cramped layout that might require you to use secondary layers. TKL always feels natural and intuitive to me, and it's where I go when I feel lazy and don't want to even look down to find keys. It basically works like muscle memory at this point. And with the CIDOO ABM084 provided by Epomaker, that's exactly what you get, plus the addition of a knob and 2 multifunction buttons that can work both for media controls as well as for backlighting configurations, as we'll see later. With the CIDOO, you also get 3 ways to connect the keyboard: wired with USB-C and wireless with 2.4 GHz dongle or Bluetooth 5.0. With its 3000 mAh battery, you get decent battery life with 2.4 GHz with no RGB, or a pretty good one if you opt to go with Bluetooth. Its PCB offers N-key rollover and has 5 pins TTC branded hot swappable north-facing sockets, which, while usually good for backlit keycaps, you'd have to bring your own see-through caps here if you want to take advantage of the north-facing orientation, since the ABM084 comes with opaque ones, as we'll see later. But because my copy came in white, you can still see the light reflection under the keycaps, since the LEDs here are very bright. You also get the typical per-key RGB illumination schemes that you can pick from a few pre-configured hardwired colors and animations, plus brightness and speed, as well as from its driver software that gives you a bit more customization options over the lights. But unlike with the other boards in this video, the ABM084 does let you create your own static light custom scheme on the keyboard itself if you don't want to use its driver software, which is a nice bonus. For that, you press and hold its nice aluminum knob for 5 seconds, choose one of the hardware multifunction buttons, then choose 1 out of 8 colors for each and every key, which can be a quite tedious process, as you can imagine. Once you're done, just press the chosen multifunction button again to save it. In this mode, you can also use the knob to select the backlighting brightness. My review sample came with pre-lubed linear Gateron Pro yellows, like a few other boards in this comparison, which is great, since these are now the best budget switches in the market anyway, perfectly weighted and lubed. But Epomaker gives you other choices as well as their own branded switches to pick from. The stock keycaps on this off-white colored version are thick dye sublimated PBT in the cherry profile. The legends are on the small side and located on the bottom left, which gives this board a vintage Mac vibe, which might be a good or a bad thing depending on your preference. As a touch typist, I don't really care where the legends sit on the keycaps for practical reasons, although I might care for aesthetics. And here I think the small legends in the weird position are not offensive as far as looks go. The PBT mix used here is of the smooth type, and these caps feel very nice to type on, and their thickness definitely helps with the sound, which, as we'll hear later, is one of the highlights of this keyboard. While Epomaker doesn't give details about the mounting system here, it feels like a regular trade mount design, which means this is a old school firm typing experience, which is always more appropriate to typists with good typing technique. The stabs are plate mounted and very high quality. They are tight fit into the plate cutouts and come generously pre-lubed, which is nice. Although I did get a weird squeaking sound from the space bar that was rather tricky to get rid of, and required some modding to resolve. The mod I used to fix this problem is the same one I used on my Whisper Quiet keyboard build video that I'll leave a link up here if you want to learn about it and more details later. But that basically means cutting off the tiny horizontal stop blocks from the stabilizer stems. This is usually a mod recommended for silent builds, which this keyboard is not, but that was the only thing that worked to get rid of the annoying squeak sound from the ABM084 spacebar. And for that reason, I applied it only to the spacebar stabs here, and not to the other stabilized keys, which didn't have that problem. The CIDOO ABM084 has a plastic case that, just like with the Feker Alice, also feels like ABS, but that does feel very sturdy and premium. The case is two halves, also attached with clips and screws, but here the construction is far more solid than that of the Feker Alice, with almost no case flex, a direct result of the tray mount design of this keyboard. Like the Feker Alice, the ABM084's case also has a storage compartment to keep the 2.4 GHz dongle, which in this case is located in the bottom, a feature that is always appreciated. The case measures 36 centimeters in width and 13 centimeters in depth, which means the ABM084 has basically the same size of the Feker Alice, 2.1 centimeters in height in the front side and 3.2 centimeters in the back side in the flat position. You will also get rubberized flippy feet for height adjustments for 3, 6, and 10 degrees. It weighs 970 grams, or 2 pounds and 2.2 ounces. The board comes stuffed with pour-on foam sound damping, both in the bottom case and between the plate and the PCB. The advantage of pour-on foam is that, unlike with the silicone used in the Feker Alice, it preserves the low-frequency sounds generated by the Gateron Pro yellow switches, resonating inside the plastic case of the ABM084, which makes this board one of the best sounding ones in this roundup, as we'll hear in a minute. The software here, again, is nothing to write home about. It is there and gets the job done, but wins no prize in performance or user interface design. And like with all other boards in this video, it allows you to save your settings to the keyboard's memory, so you don't have to keep it running in the background. You get keys remapping, macros recording, and backlighting configurations. Also, you don't get a programmable second layer. But as this is a TKL, you'll probably not need that feature here anyway. If you get the CIDOO ABM084 directly from Epomaker, you get their standard limited 1-year warranty. Okay, let's now hear the CIDOO ABM084 in its stock form and with the modified spacebar. With the fixed spacebar, this keyboard sounded very pleasant to my ears, with far more lower frequency thok than any other keyboard in this roundup, which made this a pleasure to type on. And who is the CIDOO ABM084 recommended to? If you don't require flexi plates, don't want to learn your way around a new small form factor layout, but still want features like wireless connectivity, backlighting, and media controls, this TKL might be a great buy. It's a lot of value for 95 bucks. It comes with the best budget switches in the industry at the moment, and it sounds great to boot, especially if you don't mind making the simple mod to its spacebar as I did here. Also, if you're looking for a keyboard with a well-behaved look to use in an office environment, for example, the ABM084 in both its off-white and black colors would be perfect choices. Moving on now to the flashiest, literally, keyboard of this roundup, the 75% KiiBoom Phantom for $160. This board has a striking look and comes with a super popular layout. This is the only 75% board in this list, and considering that exploded 75% with a knob has been the most popular layout in the enthusiast market in the last 2 years, the KiiBoom Phantom already starts with an advantage here. It has basically the same keys configuration as the Keychron Q1 V2, the one that comes with the knob, 3 keys in the right nav column, and the arrows cluster with a small south side offset. The consensus seems to be that an exploded 75% layout is the best compromise between space and functionality, since here you keep almost all of the keys you'd have on a TKL, but in a significantly smaller form factor. As long as you're okay with a slightly more cramped F-row, using a smaller navigation cluster, and learning to use a secondary layer for a few functions, this might be the best layout for you if you're looking to have more free space in your desk. Like with most of the other boards in this video, the Phantom comes with a volume knob and also gives you 3 ways to connect: wired on USB-C and wireless with either 2.4 GHz or Bluetooth 5.0. Its 4000 mAh battery will give you an okay battery life on the 2.4 GHz radio and a much better one on the Bluetooth, as you'd expect. But the brighter you diode the RGB backlights, the shorter that battery life will get, of course. Its PCB offers N-key rollover, 5-pins hot-swappable south-facing sockets with ultra-bright RGB LEDs for some pretty intense light shows under its clear case and keycaps, which, together with the down-firing LEDs on the bottom side of the PCB, are this keyboard's main party trick. You have the typical per-key RGB illumination schemes that you can pick from a few pre-configured hardwired colors and animations, plus brightness and speed adjustments, as well as additional customization options when using its driver software. The switches here are KiiBoom's own pre-lubed crystal linear switches, which, as the name implies, are completely translucent with polycarbonate housing and nylon stem. But despite looking awesome and also coming pre-lubed, these didn't feel as smooth as the Gateron Pros that other cheaper keyboards in this list came with. So despite the same looks, these switches are not in the same smoothness league as the also fully translucent and more expensive Everglide Aqua King or Taxi Ice Candy, for example. For that reason, I went ahead and added an additional layer of lubricant with my own Krytox mix on the housing, stem, and spring, to see if I could improve the smoothness of these switches. Lubing them didn't make much of a difference in the sound, but it did help with the typing feel. These switches also come with long stem poles, which means they have a reduced travel distance of 3.6 mm and the crisp bottom out you'd expect from this type of switch. The spring weight here puts out 60 grams of bottom out force. The clear keycaps included with the Phantom are also likely made out of polycarbonate and have large centered legends. The material here certainly helps with the looks by letting all the blinding backlight to come through, as well as with the sound, which was quite nice as you hear later in the typing test segment. The downside here is that if you're not a touch typist, the backlighting can make it difficult to see the legends depending on the brightness level you set the RGB. Not to mention that the excessively bright lights can also be distracting. The profile seems to be the same ASA from ACO, which I like a lot. The ASA profile has a similar height to OEM, but it has spherical tops that are far more comfortable to type on. The legends here are some type of UV thermal printing, which are obviously not as durable as the usual double shot and dye sublimation stuff we're used to with ABS and PBT sets. But the manufacturing options here are limited to UV printing because of the polycarbonate material used for the caps, which would not allow traditional and more long-lasting legends to be used. But at least as far as UV printing is concerned, these seem to be very high quality and should still last for years. This is not the cheap pad printing crap we're used to get with the disposable membrane keyboards that come with pre-built office computers. Overall, these keycaps are really nice and feel very high quality in the same level of the stuff from ACO I've tried so far. But then again, you could always replace these caps later on if and when the transparency novelty factor wears out. In fact, this keyboard will look great with a clean black on white PBT set, such as this Artifact Bloom series from Drop I'm showing here. The KiiBoom Phantom is the only other keyboard in this list, together with the Feker Alice, to offer what most keyboard enthusiasts would consider a real gasket mounting system. Which means the silicone gaskets employed here not only work to isolate the plate from the acrylic case, but they also offer quite a reasonable amount of plate bounce, which together with the flaxy aluminum plate employed here, is sure to please the trampoline gang out there. Interestingly, there is a single fairly complex sheet of silicone that works both as sound damper between the PCB and the plate, which even include a thin 1mm layer that goes between the switches and the PCB, kind of like a PE foam switch pad, but made of silicone in this case, and that protrudes to cover the plate wings and isolate them from the case. It is a similar idea, if a bit more sophisticated, of the silicone layer that KBD fans developed for the KBD67 Lite. And I'd say that it is working as well with the Phantom as it did on the KBD67 Lite. The Phantom also comes with PCB-mounted stabilizers, making it the only keyboard in this list to have this feature, which is really nice to see in a keyboard in this price segment. And, as many of you already know, PCB screw-mounted stabs, while not as convenient as plate-mounted ones, are usually better in terms of sound and durability. And the stabs used here are very good and come pre-lubed, which is another positive for this keyboard. The only issue I had here was with the spacebar, where the combination of the long stem-pulled switch with these keycaps wouldn't allow the keycaps mounting to completely attach with the stab stems all the way in, leaving a small height gap that caused the spacebar to wiggle and snap when pressed hard on its extremities. Because I usually hit the spacebar with my left thumb right on top of the switch, there was no noticeable rattle when I was typing. But just to avoid weird snaps whenever I hit the spacebar off-center, I decided to do something about it. The fix was to add a bunch of regular 8mm switch silencing O-rings to each of the spacebar mountings where they mate with the stab stems, but not on the mount that attaches to the switch. The idea here was not to silence the bottom out, and instead was just to equalize the height between where the keycap mounting hits the stab's housings and the bottom out position of the switch. The simple mod worked to close the height gap caused by the long stem pole of these crystal switches, and together with a small application of dielectric grease, completely fixed the spacebar instability issue and improved the sound at the same time. The KiiBoom Phantom case is made out of two acrylic pieces that are quite heavy and feel nice and sturdy. The transparent acrylic is what gives this board its unique looks and allows the boatload of RGB lights to do their thing. The case's two halves are screwed together with plenty of space for the silicone gaskets to do their work here, and the board feels solid as a brick in your hands. No creaking or case flexing at all. They used a piece of metal with the same rose gold color of the plate to hide the battery on the bottom of the case, which would otherwise be visible through the clear acrylic. The case also has a magnetic compartment to keep the 2.4 GHz dongle. Again, awesome feature. The case measures 33.2 centimeters in width, 15 centimeters in depth, 2.6 centimeters in height on the front side, which will probably require a wrist rest for most people, and 4 centimeters in the back side. It has no height adjustment, so you have a 5 degrees inclination angle when measured on top of the third row of the ASA keycaps. It weighs a heavy 1.46 kilograms or 3 pounds and 3.6 ounces. The KiiBoom Phantom uses the same software framework from the TH66 we saw earlier and many other keyboards from Epomaker and other brands out there. So everything we've seen for the TH66 also applies here. Keys remapping, macros recording, and backlighting configurations. The only difference with the TH66 is that here you can save multiple profiles, which you could not on the Epomaker board. But just like with Epomaker, here we also get a very good instruction manual in English. KiiBoom offers a limited 1-year warranty on all its keyboards, and their warranty terms and conditions are detailed in KiiBoom's website. Let's hear the KiiBoom Phantom's typing test with its crystal switches lubed with my Krytox mix, plus the simple mod I did to the spacebar. In my opinion, acrylic encased keyboards usually sound good. A bit more on the clacky side, but still a good clack. And here that rule still applies. The thick acrylic case with the very good implementation of silicone gaskets between the aluminum plate and the case, plus the long stem-pulled crystal switches and the thick polycarbonate keycaps, gave this keyboard a very nice sound. The sound profile is well balanced, with neither high or low pitch, and the bottom outs are perfectly defined. A fantastic typing experience. And who should consider getting a KiiBoom Phantom? The first and most obvious group would be RGB aficionados, of course. It is hard to find a better light show in the shape of a keyboard, that's for sure. But don't let the RGB lights here mistake this keyboard as just a gamer's toy. This keyboard has the most competent mounting system out of all the keyboards I tested for this video. And that translates to both its great typing feel and its nice sound profile. Another group that will be happy with this board will be heavy typists that like plate flex and bounce, since here you get decent amounts of shock absorption with its well-implemented silicone gaskets. This thing can take a beating from hammer fingers without flinching, while still sounding nice and clean. Next, we're checking out the most portable keyboard out of this bunch, the Kemove K68 Butterfly for $70. While 65% are usually the smallest keyboards you can get with the narrowest cluster, Kemove took the K68 even further in the compact size aspect by trying to make this a relatively low-profile keyboard that could still use regular size switches, as we'll see in a bit. The 65% layout here is of the compact type with no gaps and uses 1-unit keys between the spacebar and the arrows cluster. Here, interestingly, you get a tilde key on top of the right side column, which is not something I've seen before, and as someone who types in other languages other than English, I very much appreciate. Most 65% out there usually put the tilde function as a second layer under the escape key, which, while that works, it can be a hassle to have to use the FN key every time you need to access the tilde or the backquote symbols. At any rate, since you can remap keys through Kemove's driver software, you can change that or any other key as per your own personal preference. And continuing with this video's trend, the K68 also gives you 3 ways to connect: wired on USB-C and wireless with 2.4 GHz or Bluetooth 5.0. It packs a 3000 mAh battery that, just like the other boards here, will give a decent battery life on the low latency 2.4 GHz radio and a much better one on the higher latency Bluetooth 5.0, depending on the RGB configuration you go with. Like the others here, its PCB also gives you N-key rollover, 5 pins hot swappable north-facing sockets with hardware and software configurable per-key RGB backlighting. You also get this nice-looking light bar that circles around the whole keyboard and has almost perfect light diffusion. My K68 sample, like the Feker and Epomaker CIDOO boards, also come with factory lubed Gateron Pro yellows, which is always a nice linear choice. Which also means I don't have to lube them myself, since Gateron Pros have perfect factory lubing. I really appreciate the fact they tried to do a lower profile keyboard that didn't use specialty half-height switches such as KO Chalk's or Cherry and Gateron's low profile options that offer shorter travel distances. This ensures that you get not only the full travel of regular size switches, but also the option to easily replace these with any other MX compatible switches you like in the future. Half of the height reduction achieved with this board, especially on the top row, came from using low-profile keycaps. While I don't know exactly what profile this is, Kemove claims these are DSA, but DSA has a flat profile where every key has exactly the same shape, which is definitely not the case here. I can tell you they are about half the height you'd get on an OEM profile, and they still keep the side profile slope that makes rows feel curved, like what you get with OEM or Cherry, for example. These are backlit and double shot, which Kemove claims to be PBT, but that feels more like a blend of PBT and ABS. Kinda like Echo keycaps, which makes them feel a bit smoother than most PBT caps out there. And maybe that's why you get sharper legends here than with most backlit PBT sets, since mixing ABS should help to improve the precision of the legends molding. But at least they feel a bit grippier than most ABS keycaps and feel really nice to type on, if you can get used to the different sensation of typing on half-height keycaps sitting on top of regular height switches, that is. The PCB and steel plate assembly of the K68 sit on the bottom case, supported by plastic posts only on the edges, which means the PCB doesn't have screw posts beneath it, such as on traditional tray mount boards. There is no foam under the PCB here, but the silicone pad that goes between the plate and the PCB seems to be enough to damp the unwanted sounds. The plate-mounted stabs come pre-lubed, but unfortunately they do wiggle around into the plate's cutouts, so here I felt the need to mod them by applying silicone stickers to the PCB underneath the stab stems, then applying medical tape on the edge of the plate's cutouts, and then relubing the stabs with my Krytox mix and XHT BDZ on the wires to smooth things out even further. Like what I did with the KiiBoom Phantom, here I also added 8mm O-rings around the mountings on both ends of the spacebar for additional stability. Although here, a single O-ring on each side was enough. Modding the stabs transformed the typing feel and sound of this keyboard, as we'll hear in the typing test segment. Their goal here was to make a 65% with small but useful bezels that you can use as handles, and then try to make the keyboard's overall height as low as possible while still using regular MX switches. Most of the overall height reduction here came from placing the PCB as low as possible into the case and then using low-profile keycaps. And just like they did with the Aries 61 I showed here in the channel some time ago, the K68 also has a slightly negative inclination angle that, while it can seem a bit odd, is actually a bit more ergonomic than regular keyboards that have a positive inclination angle between 3 and 5 degrees in their lowest setting. I really like the end result here. While this is not technically a low-profile keyboard, it is low enough to make it thinner and easier to carry around as a portable keyboard, without bringing the compromises you usually get from specialty low-height switches. The case measures 33 centimeters in width, 11.7 centimeters in depth, 2.2 centimeters in height in the front, and 2.5 centimeters in the backside. If you consider the curvature of the keycap's profile, you get a negative 1 degree inclination angle on its flat position when measured on top of the third row, and a 6 degrees angle with the feet extended. It weighs 764 grams or 1 pound and 10.9 ounces, which makes it the lightest keyboard of this round. But that doesn't necessarily feel light when you pick it up, considering its size. The case has the same texture of the keycaps, which feels like a blend of ABS and PBT, and feels quite sturdy, but will creak when twisted, since there are no screws fastening the keyboard's case with the plate in the center. The top half of the case also has a lip that raises the case profile to a point where it reaches the bottom of the keycaps, which helps to hide the switches, something I always find more visually appealing than just having floating keycaps and exposed switches. You can get the K68 in either black or white. The driver software used here is the same one I had already tested with the Aries 61, which, while not the best thing out there, at least feels like there was a tiny bit more effort put into it in terms of visuals and features. But it is still far from intuitive and will require some trial and error to figure out how to remap keys, program macros, and light schemes. If you want to see how to do those things on this Kemove software, I'll leave a link up here so you can check out my Aries 61 video where I go into far more details on how to use and configure it. Kemove does offer a limited 1-year warranty, but you should definitely read their terms and conditions in their website, since they don't offer free shipping for product replacements within warranty, for example. So let's hear the Kemove K68 both in stock form and with modded stabs. First off, big sound difference between the stock and modded versions. It seems Kemove did a much better job with the stock stabs in the Aries 61 than here. But at least it is not something difficult to fix, as I showed. And once you fix the stabs, the keyboard sounds very nice, with a hint of low-frequency tone that makes it sound very balanced and pleasant. The overall typing experience is very nice, but might take a bit of time to get used to if you have never typed on half-height keycaps before. And who should consider getting the Kemove K68? Here, I'll make a recommendation based on my own personal use. The K68 is my portable keyboard that travels with my laptop in my backpack whenever I'm out of town. I even got Kemove's own hard-shell travel case that fits this keyboard like a glove and has enough space for its accessories. This case ensures the keyboard doesn't get scratched and crushed inside my bag and doesn't add additional bulk and weight, which is perfect for my use case. The K68 has all the basics I need for a portable workhorse keyboard, both a battery-saving Bluetooth connection and a low-latency 2.4 GHz dongle for whenever I'm in the mood for some gaming. It has great switches and keycaps. It is not too big or heavy, while maintaining all the basic keys I use the most, and types and sounds great, especially after modding its stabs. So I think anyone with similar requirements, or someone that just wants a nice looking, nice performing, space saving, inexpensive 65% keyboard, and anyone who is not afraid to mod some stabs, should definitely consider this little keyboard. And finally, let's check out the only bare bones kit of the bunch. the 65% GamaKay LK67 for $70, which means that here you only get the case with pre-installed stabilizers and you need to bring your own switches and keycaps. Like the Epomaker TH66, the GamaKay LK97 also has an exploded 65% layout with a volume knob, but with 3 keys on the right navigation column and with a slightly offset arrow cluster. You also get 3 1-unit keys between the spacebar and the arrows keys. And here again, you guessed it, 3 ways to connect: USB-C and wireless on 2.4 GHz or Bluetooth 5.0. Its included battery packs 2400 mAh capacity. That should give you enough battery life for a full day of gaming on the low latency 2.4 GHz connection, or even a couple of weeks on Bluetooth 5.0, depending on the RGB intensity. Here we also get the standard N-key rollover, 5 pins hot swappable north-facing sockets with both hardware and software configurable per-key RGB illumination. For this board, I decided to go for a completely silent build in a pink theme for Mrs. I/O to be able to use it at night with no noise. So for switches, I went with the community favorite Silent Tactile, 62 grams Gazoo Boba U4, which I paid $60 Canadian for 70 switches in late 2021, and then lubed them with my usual 50/50 205 Grade 2 and 105 Krytox mix. For keycaps, since she demanded backlit keycaps with visible legends in low light, I went with Glorious Aura V2 in the OEM profile, a $35 PBT backlit set that will fit any layout between 60% and full size. And the pink color of the set worked well with the one from the LK97. Like the K68, the LK97 has a non-standard mounting design, where the steel plate and PCB assembly are screwed to each other and sit on peripheral posts on the bottom case half. So here you don't get plate flex or bounce of any type, which is to be expected for a $70 kit, of course. The board also comes with foam pre-installed between the plate and the PCB. The plate-mounted stabs that come with the kit are very good and came well lubed. They're also solidly attached to the plate with zero wiggle, so unless you're going for a silent build like I'm doing here, there is no need to mod them at all. But for silent builds, I like to cut the stop blocks from the stab stems like I did with the space bar of the CIDOO board earlier, following the same mod I showed on my Whisper Quiet keyboard build video. Then I lube the housings and stems with my Krytox mix and XHT BDZ on the wires. The LK97 has ABS plastic case with no height adjustment and 4 silicone feet at the bottom. The top half side walls are tall enough to completely hide the switches, which is always a good thing in my book. You get a light ring around the volume knob to indicate the battery level, and 3 light bars, 2 small ones on the sides and a large one on the back, which all work well to give a nice glow on your desk. The case measures 32.7 centimeters in width, 11.2 centimeters in depth, 2.3 centimeters in height in the front, and 3.2 centimeters in the backside. You have a fixed mild 4 degrees inclination angle when measured on top of the third row of OEM keycaps. The bare bones kit weighs 576 grams, or 1 pound and 4.3 ounces. When completely built, with switches and PBT keycaps, its weight came to 770 grams, or 1 pound and 11 ounces. The driver software used here is the same one from both the TH66 and the KiiBoom Phantom, but just with a different scan. In other words, it's as bog standard OEM solution as it gets. But like with the KiiBoom and unlike the TH66, here you can save multiple profiles, which is nice. So everything we've seen for those boards will work the same way here. Keys remapping, macros recording, and backlighting configurations. Oh, and also no multi-layer programmability here as well, so you can only edit the first layer. It comes with a small instructions card in English that has all the basics well covered. Like with Kemove, GamaKay offers a limited 1-year warranty, but they also don't offer free shipping for product replacements within warranty. So you should definitely read their terms and conditions in their website before you buy to see if this policy is something you're okay with. Alright, time for the GamaKay LK97 typing test with some silent Gazoo Boba U4s and Glorious Aura V2 PBT keycaps. As one would expect with these switches, this thing was dead silent. The only thing I can hear when typing on it is the switch's spring leaves movement and the sound of my fingers hitting the keycaps, which makes this build the perfect bedroom keyboard. As for the typing feel here, the lubed Gazoo Bobas offer some of the best tactile experiences you can get on an MX style switch. Gazoo Bobas have been my standard recommendation for tactile switches for a long time now, and for a good reason. Who is the GamaKay LK67 Recommended for? While $70 is a decent deal for this competent little 65%, one cannot forget that when you get a bare-bones kit like this, you still have the cost of switches and keycaps to consider, which, with the choices of switches and keycaps I made here, would cost between $80 and $90 extra, depending on how much you'd have to pay in shipping and taxes. This would bring the cost of this configuration close to $150. And while you end up with higher quality switches and keycaps when buying these on the aftermarket, that price might put such a build out of reach for a significant share of potential first-time mechanical keyboards buyers out there. But if this falls within your budget, or if you go with cheaper switches and keycaps, the LK97 can be a great option for an entry-level 65% that covers all the basics pretty well. Also, keep in mind that you can get the LK97 as a pre-built keyboard that comes with PBT keycaps and your choice of switches for some seriously low prices on Banggood and other retailers out there. In fact, I'll leave some links for those options as well in the video description below in case you want to check them out. This would make a great entertainment system keyboard with its lightweight, multiple wireless connectivity options, volume knob, and bright backlights. It would also be a great option for a travel companion if you insist in having arrows keys and a volume knob and a small form factor keyboard at all times. Now, let's hear them one more time in a quick sequence to make it easier to compare the sound of each keyboard. Have any questions or comments? You know the drill. Just leave them below or on my IOSM subreddit and I'll be happy to answer. As usual, links for absolutely everything are in the video description below. As soon as my part 2 of this series is up, you can check it out right here. Meanwhile, click here to see my recent review of glorious new model O2 gaming mouse. Thanks for watching and see you all soon.